Hello, my friends, and welcome to our first episode of Region Catholic. Actually being sponsored by St. Matthias Catholic Church in Crown Point, Indiana. And we're going to do a little bit of an Advent video series slash podcast series. We'll be running video for the duration of these episodes that we're doing for the parish. I'm Father Jacob, and this is my co-host.
Adamanta.
Nice, there we go.
Voice cracked, all right.
Yeah, solid start. But, for this first episode, we're going to do an episode on what is Advent, and then there will be successive episodes released throughout the Advent season, and then also one for Christmas Eve. So if you'll be joining us for that series, we really appreciate all the support that we can get, and also for good Catholic content for Region Catholic.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So this is our first time doing a video together.
Yeah.
We do have, our podcast Chosen.
Yeah.
The podcast, which can be viewed or listened on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. So
Yeah.
we definitely want to encourage you to check that out and, subscribe, review, and leave us a comment. But we're super excited to have this opportunity, sponsored by St. Matthias, to do video. Conversation.
I've been told that I have the face really for radio and not for video. But I guess we really wanted video for this for some reason.
We're proving the haters wrong.
That's right.
That's what this is about.
That's right.
This is the movie debut.
Yeah, this is indeed the debut. So, we're kind of exploring in this first episode really like what is Advent, and then some practicals that you and your family can do to prepare for Christmas during the Advent season.
Right.
So, really, I guess when I think about what is Advent, I think about the color of the vestments, which, if you can pause right here, it's purple. There you go. Nice. So you should know that.
I wonder how many people paused.
Probably not very many. But you think of purple vestments as like a color of penance in the church, and really like the color of penance during Lent too, because we wear purple during Lent.
Yeah.
So, but for some reason, Lent really sticks out to me more as a penitential season than Advent, doesn't it?
I'm the same way. I really, when I think of Advent, I don't think of penance.
Yeah.
You wear the same color as with Lent, but I don't.
Yeah.
Lent to me just penitential season, but I think that's because there's the practice of giving something up, or including something into your prayer regimen.
Right.
The powerhouse of, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving.
Right. Yep.
Very penitential. And with Advent, I don't think it's as strongly noted for that.
Yeah, I think of an Advent or Lent in the terms of like the Sunday school kid that I am, like the rice bowl.
Yeah.
Like you fill that puppy up with change. That's kind of like your almsgiving. That money goes to Catholic Relief Services for the poor. But that wasn't exactly your experience of it, huh?
Father and I were talking about the Rice Bowl initiative before we came on, and I remember because I went to public school when I got to high school, but I went to Catholic grade school at St. Patrick in Chesterton. I remember receiving the rice bowls.
Yeah.
I put the rice bowl in my backpack, and then
Never did anything with it.
Forgot.
Yeah.
So I failed in that regard.
Man. So if you have a Catholic Relief Services rice bowl, fill it up. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
And that's a Lenten thing, of course, not an Advent thing.
Right.
But I got to say, I filled that thing up with change, and then you put like a dollar bill on top,
Just right on the top.
Yeah, so it's like $2.85 and change, and you're like, all right, and a dollar.
I'll finish it off with the big buck. Here.
Cram it in there, you know. But so that's kind of my experience of Lent, and then like you you also did like a bona opera, meaning like you had this scroll that you wrote on. It's like good. I think it means good work.
Okay.
In Latin, and you would write on there like what you're going to give up and like what prayers you're going to do, and then you like roll it up and you have like purple yarn on it.
Nice.
That was a part of our Lenten experience as well. And then like every week you'd come back, get the scroll, and then it's like, how are you doing on your Lenten promises?
Yeah.
And you'd unroll it and be like, no, I'm not doing any of this stuff. Like, I'm terrible, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that what's interesting is we're talking a lot about Lenten initiatives, and you're like, well, wait, this is a video about Advent.
Yeah.
But part of it is that that's part of the difficulty, is that I feel like we have either dropped the ball on or not given attention to any sort of Advent practices.
Yeah.
And that's really what we want to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
Is, how can we make Advent? How can we experience Advent as the church desires for us to do?
Yeah.
And what we detailed there in the Lenten practices is very, it's tangible penance in terms of it being a penitential season. I think Advent is more difficult for people because I feel like the penance that we experience isn't as outwardly as much as it is inwardly present. Mm-hmm. And I think to explain that a little bit, what comes to mind immediately is, the term Advent. I think it's another Latin term. You were just talking about a Latin term.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, I got a C in Latin in the seminary. I took 1 year of it, and like, I've only gotten a C a handful of times.
Yeah.
Latin in seminary that year. 6th grade math, that was really hard for me.
We're really getting a toss back here.
Everyday mathematics and 2nd semester organic chemistry in college.
That's understandable.
Yeah,
I would get a C in that class.
Yeah,
if not worse.
Yeah, so I squeaked by in that one. So like, I'm bad.
Yeah,
with it,
I did 1 year when I was in the seminary. I did 1 year of Latin as well. Did all right in the class, but retention is tough. But
yeah. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Very true.
Yeah.
I think, but if I'm remembering right, I think that Advent comes from ad venire, which is like either to wait or to. I think it's to come.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, we'll go. Yeah, that sounds right.
And
that makes sense with the French and Spanish. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
We have. Is that a polyglot or polygot or how do you?
Polyglot, but I can only read some of it. I can't do much else, so that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. Sorry.
So anyway,
humble. I'm humble.
So Advent is about preparing for the Lord coming. But it's a season of waiting, and that's why I think that we struggle in relation to how do I experience Advent, because we're not used to waiting.
No.
I mean, we think about
heavy impulse culture.
Yeah, there's zero experience of delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Amazon. Like you can be sitting in your living room and you click a button and what you ordered has the potential to be at your door the next day.
The next day. 1 day Prime shipping. Do you have Amazon Prime?
No.
Dude, come on, man. It's only like $60 a year. Like,
I know.
You got to get on board, man.
I think I had it when I was a student, but then,
Is it $120 a year then? I don't know.
I don't remember.
It might be $120.
But I mean, like, think about it. If you order something off Amazon, and let's say you're like me, and you don't have Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah.
And you go to the options of delivery, and you have to go down to the regular business day, like standard delivery, and it's 3 to 5 days. People look at 3 to 5 days today, and they're like, holy cow, like that's forever.
There was a moment in the pandemic, I remember, in like March or April, when Amazon could not fulfill its 2-day shipping. Couldn't do it. And I remember that very distinctly because it was like, I'm cut off from the world.
Yeah.
Like all this stuff that I'm looking at on the Amazon app is only going to be available in at least 3 days, if not a few weeks.
Right.
Like, what am I going to do?
It's people view it as like unacceptable.
Oh, right? Yeah. It was outrage. Like customer service was bogged down. You couldn't do anything. Yeah. It's nuts. So.
But I think that there's something significant and beautiful about waiting.
Yeah.
I think it really speaks to, it builds your excitement. It builds your energy. And if you're feeling that crave for whatever you ordered, then that builds. And it speaks to the value of whatever you're waiting for.
Yeah.
And so I think that we see, strong commercializing of Christmas, which then swallows up Advent. But even within, the life of the church, I just feel like there is a difficulty with praying with and approaching the season of Advent. Again, because of our culture, like instantaneous, immediate gratification.
Yeah.
But for the people of God, it wasn't always that way.
Yeah, that's true.
There
was definitely some waiting that had to happen for the people of God.
Like centuries or like,
yeah,
millennia.
Yeah.
So maybe, Father, you could speak a little bit about, as we're talking about the significance of Advent, how our approach to preparation of the Lord's birth and his birth at Christmas is different, or is experienced or looks different than maybe the people of Israel, of the Old Testament.
Yeah, I mean, the people of Israel, you're talking like Old Testament, like Hebrew Israelites, folks from that part of our salvation history. They were awaiting a Messiah, the anointed one, the chosen one, and they kind of anticipated that he would be like royalty, like the son of David, that he would be a king that would liberate the people of Israel from Roman subjugation, Roman authority, because Rome had controlled Jerusalem, and it was kind of like subject to them. The Jews were subject to the Romans, and it continues at the time of Jesus. But never could they have ever anticipated that the Messiah and Isaiah's allusion to the suffering servant, we're talking like Isaiah, chapter in the 50s or 60s of the suffering servant, because we kind of get that motif as well throughout Advent. And then also the reality that, they were anticipating like this political figure, this military figure, but then they could have never anticipated that it was God. That God would humble himself to become like one of us in human nature. Because, you hear in the Old Testament, in the scriptures, like, your thoughts are not my thoughts, your ways are not my ways. Like, God's transcendence and otherness is so emphasized that it would be impossible to even think that God would take on human flesh. It's just, how could that be? It's just something that is so foreign to the Jewish mind that they would have had a really hard time understanding that Jesus was God.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, as you were laying that out, a thought came to mind, and I'm more or less still formulating the thought. So, hopefully it comes
just
out.
Throw it out there.
The way that I'm hoping.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the Israelite people, looking for the Savior, the Messiah, to come in the form of a political figure, that made me think that this Advent season might be one of the most important in recent memory. Because, think about the situation that we've been recently in. In the election cycle. And just like, in one of our podcast episodes, we talked about a Catholic response to chaos, and just like the vitriol and like the animosity that can develop.
The division.
Yeah. I think that there's still a tendency for people to think that, to the suffering that people experience or the hardship, that it's going to be a political figure that's going to save them from that. And I think, regardless of who you supported, or who you feel should be or should not be in office, spoiler alert, they're not going to save you.
No.
Sure, their actions and their policies hopefully will help to enhance your experience of daily life. But I think that we might fall into the same mindset. That Father was describing of the people of the Old Testament. From our vantage point now, we might think like, oh man, the people of the Old Testament, they were so misguided, or like they didn't even know, like they were waiting for some hero or military figure, and then it's like,
wait a second, what about us?
What about us?
Yeah.
I feel like there definitely seems to be a hint of that now.
That's the thing, is that human nature is very predictable and repeatable, and that's kind of the reality of what the scriptures can show us is that it's very predictive of human nature, and it's predictive of who we can be and who we can fall into. But also, as well, it can show us how to triumph and to overcome our temptations and overcome sinfulness. And I think really that's kind of the reality of what Christ's coming shows us. Is the Jews were kind of wrapped up in, we still follow the Ten Commandments, right? I mean, we believe in them as Christians. But there's a reality that if you look at like Numbers and Leviticus and you add it all up, I mean, they were subjugated to like 613 laws.
That's a lot of laws.
Beyond the commandments, right? Like,
Yeah.
Included in that reality. So, I mean, you go from the reality of trying to live in accordance with the law, all 613 of them, and then you have the realization that you need help doing this. I mean, it's hard to live a perfect life under the law, and God sends his only son as the fulfillment of the law to show us how to live it and interpret it and really like thrive in it. Like, I came that they might have life and might have it abundantly. John 10:10.
Yeah.
So God does not want us to become subjugated to the law and like collapse under its burden, but rather Jesus shows us that he's the fulfillment of it and that we can live subject to the law in total freedom. So that's kind of, the fullness of what it means to anticipate Christ's coming. I think during the Advent season is there's the reality that, we're being liberated and we're receiving this gift, and God humbles himself to become like us. There's a book called Infinity Dwindled Down to Infancy, and it's all about Jesus. And it's like, that's the gift and the reality of the Christmas miracle, and Advent is a preparation for that.
I love that title.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's a really cool book. Highly recommend it. Infinity Dwindled Down to Infancy.
Nice.
But the question, though, for us is, all these things are great to talk about and throw around, right? But how can we, like, practically enter into Advent is one of the things that we're supposed to talk about in this episode as well.
Yeah.
Like, how can we enter into Advent? Like, do you have any ideas for the watchers at home?
I think what immediately comes to mind is we were talking about some of the Lenten practices with the rice bowl and everything. I think that
Or the lack of it. I mean, yeah.
Ouch. But I think that for Advent, probably the most notable one that I'm aware of is like the little chocolates. You count the days and then you open the door and then there's chocolate inside, which is nothing wrong with chocolate.
Well, now they have wine ones
and beer ones.
Beer ones, yeah.
So
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff at Costco now.
That's
commercialization.
That's
right?
kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and maybe it's like little glimpses of the sweetness of the Lord. That that's a stretch. But
yeah. There's Lego Advent calendars now too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like you open the doors and then you get the pieces and you make something at the end.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of anticipation. That's cool. Yeah.
But in terms of, you were mentioning the Israelite people.
Yeah.
You think about how they maintain connection with God and how they prayed amidst their own waiting.
Yeah.
And I think for them it was establishing rituals of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like think of the Passover and think about those moments where they were united with one another and they were then united with God.
Yeah.
So I think that if we can establish rituals of faith, of prayer, of connection in Advent, then that can be helpful too.
Yeah.
So, one thing that immediately comes to mind is I think that Advent is a very prime time for the growth and development of the domestic church.
Boom. Yep. All about it.
Father, you want to speak a little bit to the domestic church?
Yeah, I mean, like, coined and really made popular, I think, by John Paul II. I mean, we gather as a community every Sunday to worship in the parish, whatever parish that you're a part of. And that's kind of like the reality of the visible church that you and I are a part of in our communities and that we see. But the domestic church is like an extension of that at home. So whereas like, we're called to be priest, prophet, and king by virtue of our baptism. So too are all people in the domestic church called to be priest, prophet, and king. And really, like as the priest offers sacrifice on Sunday, that the priest is offering the Eucharistic sacrifice. So too are parents called to offer, the sacrifice for their children. I mean, they're not offering the Eucharist at
Right.
home, but there's a element of sacrifice there to pray in their homes and to pray for their children. I mean, so that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, leading in prayer, offering sacrifice like going to work or,
Yeah.
like dealing with the frustration or difficulties of bills or things like that.
Wait, sacrifice like going to work? I didn't even think of that as a sacrifice.
It can be.
Uh-huh.
So, so I think that Advent is a time where families can really take the opportunity to pray together.
Yeah.
So I know a popular way for many people is by having an Advent wreath in their home. Oftentimes parishes will have it in the sanctuary, but to have an Advent wreath in your home, a lot of people have it on their dining room table.
Yep. Good
And,
spot.
You can offer prayers together as a family. You can maybe read a piece of scripture either from that Sunday or, from a book of reflections. But lighting the candle together, praying together, maybe before a meal, and that can prompt another ritual of connection of Advent. Like we were talking about family meals. Life is really busy.
Yeah.
And, there's practices and there's work. And so the prospect of having a family dinner isn't always easy. But maybe a part of the Advent practice that is going to show to the children and show to yourself that this is a different time. This is a time of preparation and setting time aside is by having a meal together. I'm not saying that you jump from having no meals together to having 7 days a week meals together.
Sure.
But, starting with like once a week, we are going to have family dinner. And as a part of our Advent practice, we're going to start with prayer. We're going to light a candle. We're going to read scripture. And then we're going to have a meal together.
Yeah. And not to mention during that time, too, maybe it's time to fast from TV, phones, cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because, like, nothing can interfere or trample upon, like, family time together than, like, phones or social media or all these different distractions that are a part of our lives, that are part of family life in the domestic church. So it can really be a sacrificial time for families to enter into to just say, all right, look, we're going to take the night off from all of this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to recommit to this. We're going to, like you said, we're going to pray. We're going to have this meal together. And then maybe afterward we can play a board game or something.
Right.
So that you can have fun as a family. Because, I mean, just because it's sacrificial and, like, giving doesn't mean that it has to be, like, terrible and, like, treacherous. I mean, it can be a big sacrifice to offer up those things,
Right.
but that doesn't mean it has to be, like, painful,
Well, and
So-
I think that Father brings up a good point in terms of the cell phone usage or media usage. I was doing a little bit of reading in preparation for a different talk that I gave, and I was looking at the stats on cell phone usage. And
Staggering, I'm sure.
I mean, first of all,
Yeah.
in 2011, there were 35% of people, according to a Gallup poll, 35% of people had cell phones that they used consistently.
Mhm.
Now it's 96%.
Staggering.
And
Wow.
the average use of a cell phone by an American per day is between 4 to 6 hours.
Yikes. 4 to 6 hours.
4 to 6 hours.
You can take off a few hours in the evening to be with your family one night during Advent.
But I think, we all know the experience. I know the experience. Like, you're just scrolling.
Yeah.
And
mindless.
Yeah. And
Mindless.
I think that what you were saying in terms of the distraction,
Yeah.
I think that we do that. We distract from feeling like we're bored, or we distract from feeling, we always feel like I need to do something. I need something. And I think that we want to harness that feeling in Advent. Don't try to block it. Don't try to distract from it. Harness the feeling of I need, because we do need.
Yeah.
And
our hearts long.
yeah.
I mean, they want to close and envelop themselves in something greater than ourselves and something solid and something true and something beautiful. And we try and fill that up with all different kinds of things. And the Advent season can really be a time to help us realize that unless our heart is going to rest upon something eternal beyond ourselves, beyond this world, then I mean, we're really going to be hurting
Right.
and longing for a long time for the duration of our whole lives.
Uh, um, I think another practice, if you want to say, or like um, ritual that you can establish as part of your Advent season would be to bring a nativity scene
Yeah.
into the home.
Yep. We talked about Amazon earlier. I mean, of course, consumerism can consume us and can be all enveloping, but it can be a tool. You go down to Borix and pick up, a nativity scene for yourself, and you can enter into the ritual of like the Christ child, like is not in the manger until Christmas Eve when he's born. You can like move the kings gradually closer, like after Christmas in the post Christmas season. I
Right.
mean, not really post Christmas, but like Christmas is more than a day; it's a season and an
Mhm.
octave, and it goes up through the baptism of the Lord, and we're celebrating the Epiphany, the coming of the three kings, the Epiphany, and you can like move the kings a little bit closer on that
Mhm.
nativity set to the Holy Family. There's just the reality that you can enter into these little rituals at home with your families in the domestic church that will enhance your faith life, that will make the faith come alive, that you can invite and really pray for your kids and pray for yourselves as parents. Um, that you really can't miss those opportunities to really let the faith become alive.
And, you touched on, especially with the nativity scene. Yeah, I would encourage, don't put the Christ child in the nativity scene until Christmas Eve. Um, and it's like, oh, but it just feels so incomplete, like without putting the Christ child.
Exactly.
That's the
Right?
point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's our lives are that way. Our life would be incomplete if it was not for the gift of the incarnation
Hmm.
of God humbling himself to share in our humanity to save us from our sinfulness. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
have that be a reminder. Yes, it is incomplete, but the incarnation in Christ's birth
Hmm.
changes that.
One of the things that is optional, like in terms of our worship, it's not something that's required. But I know one tradition that Father Jim likes to do at St. Matthias in Crown Point is he'll turn off lights
Hmm.
for the first week of Advent and then gradually turn them on
That's cool.
as Advent goes.
Yeah.
So there's like this growing anticipation, and the lights are turning on.
Yeah.
Also, as well, I learned that there's Christmas trees in the sanctuary that are plugged in throughout Advent,
Hmm.
and like I was there, and they signify like the weeks of Advent.
Oh,
There's
that's
three
cool.
there's three purple ones and one pink
So
one,
like the candles.
like the candles,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'll never forget it. I was there, and Father Vamus was there with me. He was hearing confessions. I was a seminarian, and I plugged in all four of the trees. And he was like, "You plugged in too many." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because it was the second week of Advent, and I plugged in all four. And I was like, "Father, like I plugged in all the trees." And he's like, "No, you're only supposed to plug in the two." And then I realized they were like Advent candles.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways in which we can build up this Advent season in the domestic church, in our parishes. Now you'll maybe even realize the lights, how they come on differently at St. Matthias, or those trees, or the traditions that we have in our parishes. There's all these different things that can make Advent come alive. But if you don't bring it home with you, if you don't express that with your families, then you're really missing out on an opportunity to build up that domestic church at home to really boister those traditions for Advent.
And plus, you can save money on your electric bill. So
Wow. How? Wait.
I'm
How?
just
What do you
kidding.
mean?
If you don't have all the lights on.
Oh, yeah.
That was a failed joke. But
Sorry.
anyways,
I think that might be one of the other things Father Jim is talking about. He would say he's Polish. So
well, he's resourceful.
yes, that's right.
But
And I say that being half Polish myself. No offense.
um, yeah, and I think that Advent is a season where it provides us the opportunity to realize that our faith isn't something that's done; it's something that's lived, and
Yeah, definitely.
has the ability to impact all areas of our life.
Yeah.
In terms of another practice that might be helpful in this time of Advent is further developing a connection or relationship with Our Lady.
Boom.
Yeah. So, a piece of the life of Mary that I often don't necessarily think about is,
As my phone goes off.
yeah, it's all right. It happens.
Yeah.
4 to 6 hours a day. Is the waiting. So Mary received the powerful experience with the angel Gabriel, inviting her to be the mother of God.
Annunciation.
And then she's like, wow, like there's so much to take in. And yeah, she wanted to share the joy of that news, but probably she also wanted to process like what the Lord was doing in her life. And she went to her cousin Elizabeth and probably wanted to talk with her about all that had happened. But we don't often think about like the 9 months before Jesus was born
Yeah.
that Mary was waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And so what were her thoughts like? How was she trying to prepare herself to receive the Son of God being born in her midst? And I think that's a really powerful framework for us to consider, like, how are we preparing ourselves?
Yeah.
And what are the areas in which we are waiting for Christ to be made present in our life, in our workplace, in our families, all those things.
All questions to consider as Advent unfolds. And over the next several episodes, we'll have the chance to enter into the gospel of each Sunday of Advent. And then we'll have another episode for Christmas as well that you'll be able to watch and maybe think about more of the Advent season and the Christmas season. But until then, that's all the time that we have for our first episode.
Yeah.
So, my friends, we'll see you next time when we'll dive into something else concerning the Advent season. God bless.
God bless.